And now turning to our program, Rotary's focus over the past week has really been on one of the most important elections for mayor in a generation. With former Mayor Tom Barrett leaving the office to become the U.S. ambassador to Luxembourg, there's a competitive race for the position between today's guest, acting Mayor Cavalier Johnson, and former Alderman Bob Donovan. Rotarian Dave Haynes, the Ideas Lab editor at the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and his colleague Alison Dirr, a reporter for the Journal Sentinel who's covering this mayoral election, will chat with Mayor Johnson after he delivers his opening remarks today. Acting Mayor Cavalier Johnson currently also serves as the president of Milwaukee's Common Council and alderman of the 2nd District. He was first elected in 2016 and was elected council president in 2020. Mayor Johnson has devoted the last 21 years of his life to service. Growing up in Milwaukee, Cavalier experienced all the challenges associated with poverty, food insecurity, eviction, and violence, just to name a few. After graduating Bayview High School, Cavalier went on to earn a bachelor's degree from UW-Madison. He has worked for the Milwaukee Area Workforce Investment Board, which is now called Employ Milwaukee, and the mayor's office, working directly with community and faith leaders. Cavalier and his wife, Dominique, have one son and twin daughters and live in the Capitol Heights neighborhood. Please welcome to the stage Dave Haynes, Alison Dirr, and Mayor Cavalier Johnson.
Well, good afternoon, members of the Rotary. I'm Cavalier Johnson, and it's my pleasure to be here on stage with David and with Allison. And I'd just like to start by saying, Maya, thank you for that those welcoming remarks, the invocation. As you heard, we've got twin daughters at home, so you said you actually enjoyed your coffee in peace. I take it you probably don't have twin daughters at home. I know that, as was mentioned by the president, Rotary is looking at this very important race for mayor. The first time in nearly 20 years that we're electing a new mayor here in the city of Milwaukee, and it's extremely important. I know that this is a room where news is made. I heard some of the coverage. I read some of the coverage from the last time that this event was held, and Bob Donovan stood where I'm standing now, and so I'd like to make some news as well. I actually believe we had a fair and transparent election. I also believe that drop boxes are a good thing, and we should be making sure that people across the city have greater access to the ballot box. So I just want folks to know that right off top, as we're looking for differences between the candidates for mayor here. But as said, I'm Cavalier Johnson, and I'm currently the acting mayor. I'm looking in a week's time to drop the acting part and just simply to be the mayor of the city of Milwaukee. And that's what our campaign has been focused on, using the life experiences that I have that were just mentioned, living in Milwaukee, growing up in Milwaukee, knowing the trials and the tribulations, the challenges of the people who live in the most depressed neighborhoods in this city have gone through. I know what it's like to be food insecure. I know what it's like to have insecurity in housing. I know what it's like to be a kid who's uprooted from a school year over year over year. As was mentioned, I graduated from Bayview High School, but before that, I went to Daniel Webster Middle School, and I was able to stay there from start to finish. But that wasn't the case when I was in elementary school. I went to 6 different schools, 6 different elementary schools, all across the city, from the far northwest side of the city all the way to the south side of the city. And I can tell you from my own personal experience, that's challenging for kids in this city when they get uprooted that way. So I'm using the experiences that I've had growing up in Milwaukee, and those are going to be informing my decisions as mayor. They're already informing the way that we run our campaign. And our campaign is built on this premise, is that we should have a city that is safe, first and foremost, a city that is stronger, and a city that's more prosperous for everybody who's here, right? When I talk about safety, I'm talking about public safety. Just this past Sunday, I went, unfortunately, to a scene where there were 3 people who were killed in our city. Part of that is because we have too easy access to firearms in this community for folks who should not have them in the first place. So we really need to work with our partners in order to stem the tide there. We have issues as it concerns to reckless driving, and I've released 2 plans, one on public safety generally and one more specifically about the issue that we have of reckless driving in Milwaukee. We need to work to improve the relationship that we have with state government. For far too long, for 15 years plus, the relationship between the city of Milwaukee and the state government has been poor. And I really want to work to rebuild those relationships. It was mentioned that I'm a graduate of UW-Madison, and so because of that, I've been up and down that road more times than I know. So I can do it in my sleep, and I'm prepared to use my experience of going back and forth to Madison to rebuild the bridge, rebuild the connections between the city of Milwaukee and our state government as well. And then lastly, when I talk about prosperity, I think about the experiences growing up, again, in those most challenged, depressed neighborhoods. In zip codes like 53206, where I spent my formative years, a zip code that is the most incarcerated for young African American males in the United States. By the time young black men reach my age, 35 years old, half of us in that zip code would have spent some time behind bars. And I've got the brothers and the cousins to prove it. As a matter of fact, one of my brothers is a warden in a Wisconsin prison here in Milwaukee, and I've got another brother who has been his inmate, who has been in his custody. So I've seen it, and I know it, and I also know that if we work to provide family supporting opportunities, true family supporting jobs, like we once had in this community decades ago, and the people who live in our community have the opportunity to have less financial stress. Where they're able to purchase their house and have a roof over their heads and put food on the table and clothes on their kids' backs. When you get a critical mass of that happening, the reaction of kids when they go out into the community is different. It's different when they hit the streets. It's different when they go into the classroom. And when that happens so much in neighborhoods, when more people do that, the people who live across you are actually become your neighbors, no longer just people who live in the neighborhood where you are. When that happens and people start looking out for each other, the neighborhoods begin to gel. They become cohesive. They start looking out for each other, and that's how you get to true public safety. So those are the things that are guiding my campaign. And I think if we do that, we'll be in a position to make Milwaukee the most livable big city in the United States. I don't want Milwaukee to be this city that's the best kept secret. I want people to come here. I've said I've got an ambitious desire to grow the population of the city. I think we should be heading towards 1 million people, not down to 500,000. In order for us to do that, we have to have a new approach. And so my vision are those things, and I think we can get there by making sure we have a 21st century approach to job creation. That means working to rebuild and to build, in some cases, a strong and diverse middle class that actually has the opportunity to lay roots and grow here in Milwaukee. Rebuilding those relationships with state government that I just talked about. Working to make sure that people in our community have access to people-centered development in their neighborhoods that makes it safer for them when they go out, not only if they're driving a car, but if they are walking, if they are pushing a stroller, if they're using a bicycle, if they are pushing if they're on the roadway some other way than in a vehicle, if they're on a scooter or something like that. Those things draw additional development, not just downtown, but in the neighborhood. That's how we grow the population of the city. That's how we make Milwaukee stronger. And so those are the things that I want to see. And I'm happy to have the conversation today about my vision for the future of Milwaukee. But before doing that, and as I conclude my remarks here, I'd like to just take a moment of silence here for a fellow Rotarian, Bob Hager, who passed away suddenly. Bob, I have known for a long time. I talk about my experience growing up in Milwaukee, and one of the things that helped to get me to where I am right now is the fact that I participated in a pre-college program for low-income kids in Milwaukee Public Schools through the YMCA of Metropolitan Milwaukee. That program was called Sponsor a Scholar. And one of my mentors and best friends for over 20 years in that program was your friend too, Bob Hager. And so if you would just join with me just for a moment in a moment of silence for Bob Hager. Thank you. All right. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for being at Rotary. As we mentioned last week, we conducted a People's Agenda project at the Journal Sentinel with our colleagues at Milwaukee Public Radio and Milwaukee Public Television, and we asked readers and participants in that survey, what do you want the candidates to be talking about as they compete for your votes? We've used that information from the 400 respondents to help shape some of our coverage. So thank you to all the Rotarians who participated. So, Mr. Mayor, you work for Tom Barrett. You've succeeded Tom Barrett. How will you be different than Tom Barrett?
That's a great question, and one that I get often. Look, I was reflecting on this with my wife the other day, and when somebody works at Target, right? Nobody asks them, are you the embodiment of the Target corporation? No, you're not. My experience growing up in Milwaukee as a young black man is completely different than what Tom Barrett's was. By his own admission, Tom Barrett said he had sort of a Leave It to Beaver existence in Milwaukee, and I certainly did not. Right now, I've got a bullet hole in the back of my car. I've got a son who, after his birthday just a few years ago, was scared out of his shorts because of that incident that happened in our neighborhood. I grew up with all the challenges that we see on the news at 10 o'clock in Milwaukee. Just a couple of short years ago, I had one cousin who simply knocked on the wrong door, and he got a gun pulled up to his head. Thankfully, he was able to move his head and put his hands up, and now he's got bullet holes through his hands. Another cousin who just years before that was sitting on the porch on a summer night in Milwaukee at our home and was a case of mistaken identity and was shot 5 times. I know what it's like to be the one of the older kids in the house and having younger siblings and not having food, and they get to eat what's there. In our case, at the time, one of my younger brothers had a plain potato, and another brother had a piece of toast, a piece of bread even, with syrup on it. I know those challenges. Those are things that Tom Barrett does not or did not experience growing up in Milwaukee. And so those are the things that will inform my decisions as mayor. And there are so many people in Milwaukee that have those same sort of experience, that have experienced things similar to that. And so I think anybody growing up and having experiences like that would be completely different than somebody who grew up in a solidly middle-class, stable lifestyle.
So what do you think the most important way that affects how you will perform your duties as mayor? What's the most important way that upbringing, those challenges, affects how you will be mayor?
Yeah, I know the importance of family supporting work. I've seen it, and that's why over the course of this campaign, with the plans that I've released, one of the plans talked specifically about economic prosperity and lifting people who live in neighborhoods like that out of poverty. Right? If we can do that, if we can work to make sure there's family supporting opportunities for people across the city, especially in those challenged neighborhoods, then we would have done a service for the entire city. The saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. Well, if we can go into those most challenged neighborhoods and provide opportunities for folks who live there, true family supporting opportunities, mind you. I'm not talking about opportunities where folks have to work 2 and 3 jobs in order to make ends meet, but a job where you can go and make a decent family supporting wage, where you can put a roof over your head and you can comfortably buy a pizza for your kids on a Saturday, just because it's Saturday, or sock some money away for a rainy day or a vacation. That makes a world of a difference, for folks. And we just don't have that in this city in too many neighborhoods. And so many neighborhoods have just been mired for decades in poverty, and that poverty is what then leads to the violence that we see again on the 10 o'clock news. So I'll use my experience growing up and experiencing those things in the city to inform my decision making as mayor.
And we do want to get to economic development. I wanted to go back a little bit to this issue of violence. You've talked about it today and many times. So 2020 and 2021 were both record years for homicides. There have been about twice as many homicides this year than at the same point last year. You mentioned the 3 people who were killed in a single shooting just this last weekend. You've been acting mayor for about 3 months. You offered a plan early in your tenure to address violence. I guess I'm curious, with the numbers that we're seeing now, are there elements of your plan that you think are not working and that need to be changed?
I think one of the crucial parts of my plan, and I've started doing this, but obviously I've got a campaign to run, right? Listen, when you're in this position, when a mayor resigns, you get thrusted right into a snap election, right? So you've got to spend time governing the city, but you also have to campaign for the office, right? And so I've done some of this, but I will be doing more if I'm fortunate enough to get elected, next week. Is rebuilding that relationship with Madison. And when I talk about rebuilding the relationship with Madison, certainly what I'm referencing is making sure that we have the resources coming into the city of Milwaukee to address the needs that we have here. Having our departments run, having the funding necessary to adequately staff police and the fire department, quite frankly, working to make sure that we can give raises to our employees who work tirelessly each and every single day. I was just out this morning before coming here with some of our DPW staff who are out there it's cold, and they're out there filling potholes. I even took a crack at doing it myself. It's tough work, right? And those folks should be compensated in a way that provides a good quality middle class lifestyle. And the city should be in a position to be able to do that. But we can't do that, and we can't adequately address the issue of guns because we don't control gun law at the local level. We can't do these things without that relationship at the state. And so I've already been to the Capitol. I've had at least one conversation with Speaker Voss, as well as other legislators on the Republican side that control the legislature. There's a ton more work to do in order to rebuild that relationship. As I said, it's been poor for about 15 years, right? So it's going to take a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of rebuilding in order to do that so we can get the reforms necessary to stop individuals who shouldn't have access to these deadly weapons because they would use them to do the things that we just talked about on Sunday.
I guess just to follow up on that, uh, the conversation about shared revenue, about a sales tax, that's been going on for years. Are there steps that need to be taken now that are within your control, to try to stop this kind of constant drumbeat of death in this city?
Yeah, and we've actually, under my leadership on the council president side, have worked to stave that off at least for a year. So for those of you that may not be aware, the drumbeat of death is the fact that we've got this increased pension obligation that's coming up starting next year. It's going to double our pension obligation from about $70 million to about $140 million. And because of the revenue structure that we have at local government, we don't have the opportunity to raise revenues outside of what the state gives us. So one is the property tax, which, by the way, they cap, and no one wants to be in a position where we're having to raise property taxes. I mean, I'm a property taxpayer myself, and I don't want to pay more there either. The other is the state shared revenue program, which has been falling and has been stagnant for 20 years, right? Meanwhile, the cost for services has just continued to rise. The sort of anecdote that I talk about is, my experience living in the city at 3303 West Walnut. Of all the moving around that I did as a kid, is one of the places I enjoyed living the most. And right down the street at 33rd and Galena, there was a corner store that I frequented. And when I was a kid, you can go to that corner store and you could fill up a small paper bag with goodies for $1. You get a honey bun, you get some juice, you get a bag of chips, you can get some gum. Everything costs like $0.25 then. But now, like, the honey bun costs like 75 cents. So you can't, the dollar doesn't carry as far as it used to. And so we need the state government to realize that, to help us with our revenue issue so we're able to tackle the issue around the pension and other things. That's a roundabout way of saying that I've been working right now, that was your question, Allison, to address the issue, because in the first tranche of American Rescue Plan Act funds that we received from the federal government, I worked to make sure that we identified and put $30 million more into that pension reserve fund to give us more breathing room as we move forward in our continued negotiations and conversations with state government to provide financial relief for us to be able to address that issue. So the answer is yes. I've demonstrated that, and I'm prepared to do the same thing. But as you know, and as many people in the room here know, those federal dollars, they're not here permanently. It's unlikely, quite frankly, that we would see an additional influx of those sort of resources at the local level ever again. And so it's going to be incumbent upon all of us to work together to build those relationships so that the city of Milwaukee is in the place where it needs to be to provide the services that we need. And one last point on this is that, look, Milwaukee's in a tough spot right now, but it's not just the city of Milwaukee. Last year, the county executive and we traveled up to Rhinelander. That's some 3.5, 4 hours north. And we went up there to speak to the state's Joint Finance Committee. And we talked to them about the way that they fund local governments. Instead of driving back to Milwaukee right away, I stayed and listened to some of the concerns of other governments there. And so whether those governments were large or whether they were small, medium-sized cities or school districts, everybody was singing the same tune, is that the way that the state government funds the localities, the municipal governments, is broken. It just doesn't work. And last year, the mayors of Madison, who is a Democrat and is to the left, and the mayor of Brookfield, who is a Republican and probably a little right of center, they both came together and penned an op-ed telling the state government that the way you fund local governments doesn't work. Now, Madison aside, because it's the second largest city in the state and probably has some of the similar issues that we face in Milwaukee, albeit not to the same magnitude. Madison aside, if the state's funding formula for local governments don't work for wealthy Brookfield, then they just don't work. And so that's why we have to rebuild those relationships.
So let's jump to development, because one of the keys to building and growing a city is a strong tax base. What would you do as mayor to incentivize businesses to create jobs in Milwaukee, and how would you target those to underserved neighborhoods?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And if you're downtown here like we are, and you go outside of the War Memorial, you'll see the Couture getting ready to rise out of the ground. I like to say I played a little part in that because it was literally on its deathbed after being on the drawing board and being worked on for about 10 years. There was some infighting in City Hall, and that project was stalled, and it was going to die. But as on the council president side, I worked together. I gathered the votes. I worked with the city attorney's office and the former mayor, and we got to a point where that building could rise out of the ground. And as it's rising out of the ground, it will present 1 million construction hours. And of those 1 million construction hours, 400,000 of those hours, because of the city's residence preference program, will go to people who live in neighborhoods that I lived in, the most oppressed neighborhoods in Milwaukee, providing an opportunity for those folks to have an inroad, an access point to a family supporting job in the 21st century economy in Milwaukee. Right up the road at 5th in Michigan, there was another project that I'm happy to have played a part in as well. Is the Couture. I'm sorry, not the Couture, but Milwaukee Tool rather. And at Milwaukee Tool, they'll be bringing up to 2,000 family supporting jobs to that location. These jobs will pay $75,000 a year plus. And in the service sector at the location, those jobs will pay a wage for $15 an hour, a living wage. So it's important that we do things like that. And my philosophy is this: I want to get companies to yes. And I think it's important to continue to draw companies, back here, back to the city, back downtown. That's wonderful. But I want to work not just with the Department of City Development. I want to work with M7 and all of our partners to draw in businesses here. I want people to know that Milwaukee is a business-friendly community and that we're looking to grow and create jobs, family-supporting job opportunities right here in the city of Milwaukee. Outside of that, I think we've got an opportunity to work with our contracting at the local level to spend as many dollars as we can in the city of Milwaukee, working with diverse and minority businesses here in the city of Milwaukee, working to make sure they have access to contracting, and then also having a renewed focus in the way that we that we lay infrastructure in our community. So if we have people-centered development in Milwaukee, if we reimagine the way that our streets are laid out, so they're not accommodating just to cars, it encourages people to come out and to have more pedestrian activity, to use bicycles more, to walk more, to skateboard, to use mobilized or electric scooters. When you have that stuff happening and people are not looking to travel so far, they end up spending their money closer to home. That's how we create more activity, more economic activity in neighborhoods, and that then draws additional private development in neighborhoods as well. So that's what I want to see to grow business opportunity and grow the population of our city.
I wonder if you could, I guess, speak to Century City and how you would kickstart development there.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me just say that I know that there was an opportunity. Was it last? It's a little bit of a blur. I'm sorry. I don't know if it was last year or the year before with Strauss brands. And look, I think that was a missed opportunity for us. And
This was the meatpacking company that wanted to move into Century City.
sure, yeah, and they were looking to come in from Franklin into Milwaukee. They were looking to have a presence there to expand there and create more job opportunities there. These are union jobs, and I would have liked to see that there. Unfortunately, that did not happen. But I mean, this is an opportunity again, Allison, where I think that we could work with the Department of City Development and our partners at M7 to seek out businesses that would like to go at that site. And I think that for a number of folks, it's important that we have growth and development there. And that site used to be home to thousands and thousands of jobs, right? At that location, people were able to walk to work, and there were literally thousands of family support and job opportunities. You could walk in, and then if you didn't like that job, you could go to another place at that site and still have access to family support and work. So we should use the tools that we have available at city government in order to lure businesses to Century City, but not just there, at a number of other places around the city too. And I'm willing to use those to work with our Department of City Development. Look, I want it to get to yes. That's what I want to see.
So I think we have time for one more from Alison and I. So let's move to the streetcar, to the hop. You've said you want to expand it. How?
Let me preface the streetcar by saying this. I believe that it's an economic development tool, and I believe that Milwaukee has got to be competitive with other cities across the country if you want to attract, and not only attract, but also to retain talent. And when you go out to other cities across the country, and even across the world, when you have fixed rail development around that infrastructure, what you get is nodes of economic activity that transpire. So you think about the couture that I mentioned earlier. Right at the base of it is the streetcar, right? It's helping that development along. Very soon we'll have another apartment tower, 31 stories at the north end of the third ward, in what right now is a surface parking lot. There's going to be taxable development at that location now, and the company cited the streetcar as a reason why, one of the main reasons why they wanted to locate and do business in Milwaukee and at that intersection. And if you look along the streetcar route, of course, there's been new development that's happened. I don't think that that should just happen downtown. I think it should also happen in the neighborhoods. So that's what I want to see. I want to see it on the north side. I want to see it on the south side because I think it's an economic development tool that has proven itself. How to pay for it, though? I think we pay for it the way that we've been doing it. We go to the federal government and we ask for grants in order to expand the project. Other cities are doing this, and look, if we decide not to do it, if we leave it as a downtown circulator, which it was never intended to be, solely just that, we're going to forego having the opportunity to have this additional investment and this additional development across the city. other communities will apply for that money that we're leaving on the table, and it'll go to other places.
So just to follow up, where would you go next? Would you go up the north side? MLK has been one idea that's been floated.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see it go up MLK, up to Bronzeville. I would like to see it to go south as well, down to the south side. Again, I don't think that it was ever meant to be solely a circulator for downtown Milwaukee in the footprint that it's in right now. It should stretch beyond and go into the neighborhoods so we can see that economic development along its tracks to happen in the neighborhoods outside of downtown as well.
Okay, so some questions from the audience.
All right. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the questions, everybody. We've got a handful of questions, and obviously I don't think we're going to get to all of them, but we'll start. Questions around policy, questions around experience, questions around education, and we have some questions around the Republican National Committees, and I think that's where we'll start. So, how did the RNC Selection Committee respond to a pitch from a heavily Democratic city? And did you have any reservations about hosting the Republican Party given the 2020 election controversy?
The RNC was very favorable to our pitch, even though most of the voters in the city of Milwaukee are Democratic, and this is a bastion for Democratic votes. I think they understand that, but I think it's smart of them to take a look at coming to a place like Milwaukee, because if there's a desire to make inroads in communities that Republicans, on a national level at least, don't tend to do well in, it's smart to come to that sort of battleground. It's smart to come to a place like Milwaukee. So we were very well received, and I'm happy to have been working with our partners at Visit Milwaukee and others to help lead the charge. Going to Washington, I believe it was last Tuesday now. Again, it's all a blur. To make the pitch, to bring them here so that we have $200 million roughly of economic impact in Milwaukee to support existing businesses, to help businesses that are scaling up to do that, and to put money in the pockets of service workers here in the city of Milwaukee. No, I don't really have so many concerns about bringing the convention here. I think it'll be a great opportunity to put Milwaukee on the map, to showcase Milwaukee to the world, just like what happened with the NBA championship run of the Milwaukee Bucks. I want more of that. As I said, I don't want the city to be the best kept secret. I want it to be a place where folks think about and know as a growing, dynamic city, so we get more large events, so we can attract more people in and grow our population and create more jobs.
All right, moving on to education. What role can the mayor play in mitigating the election gap caused by that pandemic? How can we ensure onboarding third graders have the foundation of first and second grade curriculums and knowledge, and what can we as a club do to help?
That's great. I was just having a conversation about education with one of my table mates here about just that. But generally speaking, my view on education is this, right? Is that there are so many educational options in Milwaukee, right? There's Milwaukee Public Schools, there's choice schools, there's also charter schools here. And I believe that my role as mayor is not only to use the bully pulpit to encourage education, but to try to work on the things on the outside of the classroom, right? To put all of our students, no matter what school system or district they're in, to put them all in the best place to achieve academically. So if a kid is hungry before they go into classroom and that's affecting their learning, well, that's something that a mayor can do something about. If a kid lives in a neighborhood where there's violence, they have trauma because of it, well, that's something that a mayor can do something about. If a kid comes from a family like mine that had some instability in housing because their parents don't have access to family supporting work, then that's something that a mayor can do something about. So my focus is going to be on the outside of the school, working to make sure that every kid, regardless of district, is in the best possible place to succeed academically.
All right. If asked, what do you think Bob Donovan would say is your greatest strength? And conversely, what do you think your opponent's greatest strength is?
what would Bob Donovan say is my greatest strength? I think that Bob would say that I am a. This is a good question. What would Bob say? He's been attacking me so much; it's hard to. I don't know. I don't know if he likes me anymore. He would probably say that my greatest strength is talking. That's probably what he's, because he said that at a recent candidate forum. I would say that Bob's greatest strength, in all seriousness, is his zeal for public safety. I think that down to a person, Bob really cares for the men and the women who sign up and take an oath to protect and serve this community. It's been rich in his family. His daughter, as he's mentioned, is a current police lieutenant in the police department. I've gotten to know her over the years. I think she's great, and I think again, yeah, that is a strong strength of Bob's, is that he cares very deeply for the men and women of the police department and the fire service as well.
Moving on to some policy questions. Would you be interested in pursuing a consolidation of city and county government?
I wouldn't say that I'm interested in seeing that right now, although there are areas in which I think that the city and county would be able to work in conjunction on better than what we currently do. And I think that right now, with myself coming in as mayor, and David Crowley as the county executive, and Marcelia Nicholson as county board chairwoman, I think there's a lot of synergy with these young elected African American diverse leaders who are in power in some of these principal seats of power in local government, that we could see greater collaboration, greater cooperation between the city of Milwaukee and Milwaukee County. So not full-on consolidation, but there are opportunities, I think, for us to work better together.
All right. Moving on. Milwaukee has constantly been rated as a very highly segregated community. Do you feel there's historical policies and procedures in place that have led to this segregation, and would you be open to pursuing existing policies and procedures and basically rewriting anything that you feel has contributed to these situations?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there is a thing called institutional racism, and I believe that it's real. The structures that exist in government that help to perpetuate the problems of racism and segregation that we see not just here but in the state and across the country are real things. And those are things that we should be working to change when we identify them. I know that Milwaukee County was the first, the city of Milwaukee followed soon thereafter, and I voted for this to declare racism a public health crisis, right? And so we're constantly working day in and day out to better educate our staff across government and to put policies in place to make sure that interactions between the government, the city government in our case, and the constituents that we serve are fair, and transparent. And those are things that we should continue to work on across the board.
All right. In your opinion, what is the most important action of Rotary clubs such as ours can undertake to improve the city of Milwaukee?
That's a great question. And look, this is a contact sport. And I say sport because this is like, running for office is like the most athletic thing that I can do. I'm not very athletically inclined, but you guys and your participation here and being civically minded is great. But I would encourage people here to take the conversations you have in this room out into the community. And when I talk about the issues that affect city government, if you live here, you certainly see them. If you don't live here, but you commute into the city every day, or you work here often, or you bring your family here, or you come in for entertainment or dining or what have you, you all can play a role too, right? and especially if you live in some of the surrounding communities around Milwaukee, because it's very likely that you're represented by members of the legislature who have the power that can help us to move this thing forward so we get the services that all of us, and I say this with purpose, that all of us who are residents of the city, but not just the residents, but the visitors and the commuters expect and deserve. When you come in to Milwaukee, if you're a commuter, if you take the freeway in, eventually you get off and you drive on a city street. If you're in a situation where you need protective services, you're dialing up 911. Well, that's Milwaukee police that are responding. If not, police from a suburban community typically. If you have a medical emergency, then it's the Milwaukee Fire Department that's coming to respond. And we talked about the Milwaukee Bucks championship and how that put the city on the world stage. All those people that were here, the 100,000 people that were in the Deer District, that represented, I believe it was the fifth largest municipality in the state of Wisconsin, with all those folks assembled. Everybody's coming here and they're using services, but nobody is putting in except for the people who live here in the city. And if Milwaukee is going to be competitive, if all of us collectively in our region are going to have a competitive metropolitan city that is able to attract and compete with others across the country, then we need everybody in the game. We need everybody's support. And it's rooms like this that I think have a very powerful influence, whether you live in the city, and especially if you don't, with members of the legislature to take that argument there, to make sure that the city's in the best position to be able to compete and to succeed in the 21st century.
All right. The next question is about access. If a constituent wanted a meeting, how long would it typically take to be able to get a meeting? It sounded like an in-person email, or I'm sorry, an in-person meeting. So if a constituent had a valid situation and wanted a meeting, how long would it take to get a meeting, and would they have to work through a lobbyist or a consultant in order to get your time?
I'll tell you this, that as alderman, and even as council president, well, maybe not as council president because the pandemic set in, but as alderman, this is what I did. I continued to go to doors just like I was when I was running for office. Now, I was elected when I was the alderman, so I couldn't go with the same intensity that I was when I was only running for office, but I still did it. And I made a point of doing that because I thought it was important to make sure that I connected and touched base with the people that I represented in the way that they had gotten to know me and expected. So I did that, and I'd like to continue doing that. I had in-district office hours. I was the second district alderman, and so we had on the second Friday of every single month. I don't drink coffee, but we met at a coffee shop, but we called it Second Cup for those folks who are having their second cup of coffee to come and talk to me about whatever the case may be. It could be anything. It could be anything. And we hosted on a monthly basis, sometimes multiple times a month, meetings with constituents across the district. So I am an open person. I have prided myself on being that, and I want that to remain in the time that I'm mayor as well. I want to have open dialogue with the people of the city of Milwaukee, and for them to have access to me as the mayor, so they can let me know what concerns that they have.
As a mayor of a large city, what have you done to learn about what successful cities across the world have been doing? And is there anything that you've learned that you can apply to your role here in Milwaukee?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I often look at other cities, whether they're domestic or international, and I think part of my own story of service is traveling and doing service in other places. So I spent my first spring break in college not on a beach in Florida, but in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, helping out there. I spent time living and working for the YMCA in New York City. I had the opportunity to go and work with at-risk young people in London, and took the time when I was there to go to Paris as well. Been able to visit Los Angeles and having family in Chicago and in Atlanta and Washington, D.C., and seeing what works in other places. And I'm constantly looking for inspiration from other cities. And that's exactly what we'll continue to do. You don't always need to reinvent the wheel. You need to see how the wheel's rolling in some other communities. And I think you're able to adapt and bring those things, fine tune them, and bring them in place here. That's why I was talking about, the importance of fixed rail transportation and the nodes of economic activity that sprout up around them. I noticed it when I was an 18-year-old when I first took a trip to New York, but I noticed it, again later on when I was studying abroad in London, and getting out of the subway in New York and getting out of the tube in London and seeing the fact that there's a station there and businesses know that there's always going to be people that are sprouting up coming from the underground there, right? That's encouraging for the private sector. It's predictable. That draws additional development. That's why I think the streetcar is an economic development tool that could be used in a similar way that we see in other cities domestically as well as internationally. So I'll continue to do that. I'll visit other cities. I'll talk to other mayors, and we'll find solutions that we can apply here in the city of Milwaukee as well.
All right. We are running out of time here. There are a couple questions we didn't get to. I would encourage those of you whose question we didn't get to try to catch the mayor afterwards and ask it. One last question we had from your campaign manager is, you are a huge Batman fan. Which Batman movie is the best Batman movie? And who was the best portrayal of Batman?
Man. Huh. Well, I haven't seen the new Batman movie. Perhaps my campaign manager will afford me some time to go see it. Then I would be better able to answer the question. But look, I am a big Batman fan. Have been since I was like 5 years old. I think that the Christian Bale Dark Knight movie was, at least to this point, the best overall film. However, Ben Affleck's portrayal in The Cowl was the best movement that I've ever seen a Batman take. But I haven't seen the new movie yet, so the jury's out. We'll see.